Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Another choppy day in the markets. There's a lot of news sensitivity. So I'm going to do an analysis on the charts, talk BTC, look at a few other names. But I'm going to be sharing some big picture thoughts around a couple of scenarios that I'm watching that could set up for a strong July rally. And so stay tuned for that. Before I get started, just want to remind everybody more information can be found at nodeinvestor.com. I do offer some video training courses as well for those looking to get more information on technical analysis and getting started with chart reading. If you want to learn more information about my Node Insiders group, you can go there as well. Let's take a look at the news. So the spike this morning came from some positive news around Tether USD Tether, claiming that they have fully backed assets. And so there was some details here. This was not done by an independent audit firm or consultant or a CPA. Rather, it was a legal firm, but they did point that during one period or one day specifically on June 1st here, that they said it is confident Tether had more money in the bank than tokens. And so officially they had $2.55 billion in reserves. But that was the only time frame given. There was no indication whether or not it has always been fully backed or if it still is fully backed. So people are taking it with a grain of salt, but nonetheless, that did add a little bit of confidence into the markets. Following yesterday's news, BitHum, which is a significant market and certainly has a lot of influence in the space, was hacked for the tune of around $30 million. And we saw that it was multiple coins that were hacked. They started posting on their Twitter feed around, hey, we're stopping withdrawals and deposits. And so there's still more information to come out around this, but certainly negative news, never nice to see. Makes the whole industry just nervous when one of the top exchanges sees a hack like this. And always causes a quick reaction, as we saw in the prices. So it continues just to be a news-driven, highly sensitive market, but that's not really a surprise for anybody that's been in crypto for a while. We very news-driven, and you can see these reactions are relatively commonplace. So we can see here, since May, we've been in this decline. Yes, there's an attempt to put a little bit of a low in here, and I'm going to go over that in more detail in terms of some potential scenarios here at these lows. But you can see we're basically at the sub $300 billion mark on the market cap, and alts also lagging BTC considerably. But you can see the Bitcoin dominance level has now risen to 40% dominance. And so I'm starting to think that the alts are getting close to finding a low point versus BTC. Now, looking at the chart, it has been a news-driven week. In a couple of days here, you saw last week, hey, SEC says Bitcoin and Ethereum are not securities, and that caused that initial spike. Over the weekend, it kind of just drifted lower. And then coming into this week, Square Cash gets a Bit license, and that Square Cash app caused a little spike. And then yesterday, BitHum's hacked. Market sells off a little bit, but it didn't quite get hit as hard as I would have thought on that news. And then here coming into today, Tether is solvent and backed by dollars, maybe. And so you see the quick spike there in over a couple of hours. And so here we are breaking above resistance here near term. And so it's certainly been a sensitive market, very reactive to the news. And so it certainly has been tough if you've been trying to trade this market. You have to be a little bit anticipatory and prepare yourself for those potential spikes higher. And some of the altcoins have really been the place to be. I've been using BTC as some of the cues, but for the most part, my trading has been in a lot of the alts names this week. But even then, it's been far and few between. So where do we go next? There's a couple of things to watch here. Let me clear these for us real quick. There's a couple of things to watch on the up and the downside. First, the positive. On the downside, you can see Bitcoin held above this prior breakout point, this little bit of support zone on the sell-off yesterday, and had a good opportunity to keep going lower. The volume was certainly there after pausing and sitting tight for a couple of hours and more than like a day and a half, really. And it was just ripe for one of those sell-offs. I started to take some profits on some of the positions here, and sure enough, we sold off, triggered the rest of my exits, but then it held this support zone. And so I was watching here, and really at this point, the resistance level now has become the prior support level. So going into that 66.80 was the level I was watching. We saw that Tether news come out, and that caused a pretty big pump. Cleared right through all of that, and now we're looking higher in watching the next overhead resistance level. I pointed this out a couple of days ago, and this remains the same level to be watching here. Let me change the color there for us. But that, sub 69, that 68.80 going into that point is really the level to be watching. And then ultimately, the big picture downtrend that's been in place for quite some time. And so the level that I'm watching there, and that really lines up close to the 7K mark now. If you see the prices continue higher, going into 7K is really the area that I'm going to be watching if prices can continue above 6,900. So this little zone here is really going to be the first big test. You can also see that this is starting to form a little bit of a bear flag as this continues to rise in this channel, and you can see that the top of this channel lines up pretty closely to that little bit of a resistance zone. So near term, if we continue higher, that's going to be the real key level to be watching, is that 6,900 up to maybe 7,100, but I would expect a pause to happen before actually hitting 7,100. So that's going to be the levels to be watching here. You can see on the RSI, we continue higher, bumping into that 60 zone here on the 4-hour chart. Yesterday, we had a good opportunity to close above the 10 EMA. We didn't. It was just kind of flat, and we saw the sell-off happen right after that. But here we are bouncing right back. So now it's getting above it. First time it's been able to close above that here with any more than just a couple bucks here. So we'll have to see how this day closes. There's still quite a bit of time left, but the momentum is certainly to the upside. This reversal that we saw here today created a bullish engulfing candle with some strong volume, and so just technically speaking, that would be a bullish reversal buy signal. And so I would expect we see a little bit more momentum to the upside, but you always have to remember this was news driven and has been the case for most of the last week. Is we have these quick pumps and then not a lot of follow through. We have the quick spikes and it just kind of sits tight. So we'll be seeing, it'll be interesting to see if we actually see some follow through this time to the upside. Now looking at the alts, I continue to favor Ethereum. So I've actually been trading Ethereum much more this week than Bitcoin and some of the other names. And this has just been a little bit stronger and leading the way. You can see this one closed above the 10 EMA already, and it's been holding up here. And so it has been slightly stronger and giving us a little bit of more outperformance on the upside. You can see it's still stair-stepping its way higher. On the pullback yesterday, held up relatively well considering, and really kind of held this breakout point here above that 520 zone or so. We can see that was the place to hold, and now it's moving higher. And so this one definitely is looking strong. Looking at Ethereum BTC, I'm really watching this one for a potential breakout here. If you look at the big picture daily chart, it's been holding below this key resistance zone right around that 0.081 level. And so that's going to be the level to be watching. If it can break above that with some significant volume, that's going to be bullish for the alt market. You can see we had this big run, and it has held up relatively well in this recent pullback. And you compare that to some of the other names versus BTC. Cardano, EOS, still holding up pretty good relatively speaking. Neo, very bearish, has not held up, definitely a laggard in this space. Icon, still drifting lower. And IOTA, still drifting lower. So you can see a lot of these names have just been lagging, and compared to Ethereum, ETH has certainly held up a little bit stronger than some of these other names when it comes to the BTC comparative. And so that's what I'm watching out for. I use this as a little bit of a proxy for the alts. If we continue to see some movement to the upside here versus BTC, I think we'll continue to see the Bitcoin dominance pause here and start to dip again, and some of the alts may begin to benefit. Many of the alts are just very oversold versus BTC, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they've hit the low, but I think we're starting to see them get pretty close to finding a low versus Bitcoin. Now, so what about this July potential rally? So just to calibrate, let's take a quick look at the big picture here. We had the big break following the decline in May after hitting the upper trend line on this massive symmetrical triangle on the weeklies. But you can see we've had a decent decline just for the last 6 weeks, and we are attempting to put in a low here. It's certainly not a confirmed low, and in fact, this is just a bounce until we see otherwise. But I'm seeing some similarities here to the price action we saw in March, April, after also a significant pullback. And that also had some rally attempts along the way down. You can see we had these little bull flags that formed, or bear flags that formed on the way down before the final low. And then we had this choppy action. The sentiment was just as bad as it is right now. At this point, everybody said we're going to 3K, we're going to 4K, and we're back to that point again. We had the lowest close of the year on June 13th, and the RSI level on the daily chart also hit some long time lows, some very extreme oversold conditions, and we've since seen a little bit of a bounce. But that's all it's been. And so what I'm looking out for now is, as this bounce continues, yes, it's starting to form a little bit of a bear flag. It's also bouncing right into those resistance points that I just pointed out. And so this is going to be a key test here. This test going into this resistance right there in and around the downtrend line, as well as the overhead horizontal price resistance. So I'm watching this daily. We could continue higher. I expect we probably will, but going into 7K in and around that zone, what I'm looking for now is a test of this trend line, most likely a rejection, and that's going to be the test. Do we just bounce back into the lower end of the channel and go higher, or do we see a retest of the lows? Now I'm thinking we're going to break below the channel and likely see a retest of lows. That means maybe 6,400, maybe down to 6,200, in and around that zone. But then that would likely set up a bullish divergence on the daily RSI, and we could set up another rally attempt, which would break this trend line and also get us back above this 7K, likely creating a short squeeze scenario similar to what we saw in early April. Does that mean this is the end of the bear market? No, not by any means. But what I am expecting is, following this long correction we've had, we're attempting to make a little bit of a low. I think we're due for more than just a 10 or 15% bounce. I think we're due for a little bit of a counter trend rally. Now, that's the question, right? Is it the end of the bear market? And it's way too early to tell. And ultimately, we're going to need to break this broader downtrend line. So that means until prices get back above 9K or so, it's way too early to tell. But going into July, we could see a pretty decent counter trend rally that turns out to be more than just a little bit of a bear flag, 10-15% rally. So that's what I'm looking out for. An alternative scenario would be we break below this bear flag, and then we have a climactic washout low, which takes us to a sub 6K low, volume spikes, but then that would also set up another rally following a climactic washout low. And so that's the other scenario, that 6K just doesn't hold, and we have that washout low. Everybody gets extremely bearish. People start going short. They start looking for the bottom to fall out, and that generally tends to mark the low. So those are the two scenarios that I'm looking out for here. Between now and then, yeah, I'm making some small trades, some short trades, not getting too aggressive yet. And I'm taking my profits relatively quickly in this market, because that's really what the market calls for right now. And if you're even trading at all, that would probably be the ideal thing to do, is just to wait it out until we get a clear change in direction. So for now, I'm going to be looking out for this over the next couple of weeks, watching for a potential washout or a potential retest of these lows, and then a break of this near-term intermediate downtrend. So let me know what you guys think. I know there's a pretty mixed sentiment out there. Some people are thinking we've hit the low. Others, many of us, think we're going lower. I know that there's a lot of folks online. You look at the Twitter sphere, you look at the YouTubers, and there's still a lot of people out there calling for 5K and 3K and even lower in some cases. So let me know what you guys think. This is a scenario that I'm potentially looking out for. I'm always watching out for kind of what's the next potential move, but at the end of the day, like anything, you got to take your trades based on what the actual market dictates and go one day at a time. So thanks for watching, everyone. Please subscribe and hit that like button. Until next time, take care, everybody.